Okay, if you are having trouble with the blade lift mechanism on your Delta hybrid table saw, this video might be for you. There's no squeaking, there's no squealing, it's much smoother. In this particular case, it's a model 36714, but I imagine that it probably applies to other models as well. So if you have been having a lot of resistance in the blade height adjustment, or there's really loud squeaking sounds, or it stops working, in particular, maybe you brought it all the way down and then it wouldn't go up anymore, then this video might be for you. So the super quick version of this is, if your blade lift mechanism is not working because the worm and this fixed shaft part have been grinding against each other, and to the point that the worm is no longer held on by the roll pin, you need to take this off and get a 3/8 inside diameter by 13/16 outside diameter thrust bearing. These are like a few bucks on Amazon, and get it and put it between the worm and this fixed shaft part. So put it right there. So when you turn the blade height, it drives this worm gear, and it's supposed to be coupled to the shaft on the handle with a roll pin. You can see the hole for it right there. And but in my case, that broke or came loose, and so it just freely rotates. And then whenever I brought it all the way to the bottom, the worm was able to go forward to the point where it was completely disengaged from the geared, lift plate, whatever you want to call that. So then nothing happened when you turned it either way. So then I came down here and looked at it, and well, I hadn't taken this off yet, but basically you can see that this has been ground down by rubbing against this part right here. I don't know what the original design was, if something went wrong. I don't know why, but to me it seems crazy that that this would be the design, that those two parts are supposed to rub against each other, because yeah, I just don't understand that. So maybe this was modified by somebody else before I got it, or what. But anyway, I'm going to show you how to fix it. Okay, so you unscrew the knob, remove the handle, the wheel, and then there's going to be a roll pin on the front that the wheel engages with that slot. So it's not going to look like this. This is just a temporary pin that I've put in. So you're going to want to pull it out. This is what it actually looks like. Let's see. So it looks like that. And you're going to want to pull that out. Use pliers, or you might have to use a punch, hammer it out. Okay, so once you have that front roll pin removed, then you basically just rotate this worm, and if it's still, a little bit coupled with the shaft, then it will bring the shaft with it. If not, you just pull that off, screw it off of this upper gear, and then you should be able to pull this forward. And by the way, when you pull the shaft out, there's this little guide bushing thing. I don't know what you call it, but that goes around the shaft. It's possible that might fall out whenever you pull the shaft out, so just be aware of that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove this by unscrewing this nut and holding on the other side right here, right there. Okay, so here's the whole thing assembled, but outside of the saw, just to give you a sense of, you know, how everything goes together. So you remove the knob, you pull the wheel off. Here's this little shaft cover, and then you have the shaft, the worm, and then I guess what I'll call the fixed part, because this is what's actually mounted to the saw. So I don't know if this was the way it was designed or if something broke previously that caused it to start rubbing, but basically the worm and the end of this fixed part were rubbing against each other, and you can see the ends of them, they're all ground down, and obviously with this worm, the hole that the roll pin goes through is like 3/4 of the way, ground away. In my case, I think there's enough left that I can at least keep using this for a little bit, so we'll see. But if not, then you basically have to spend $75 on buying a new, entire assembly of this. That's the only place I was able to find it, was on eBay, the whole thing for $75. So what you want to do after you take everything off is, grind or use a file to file away all the burr that's been kind of pushed out along the edges, just to clean this up a little bit. So clean up around here and then around here. Okay, so basically to fix this, what I'm going to be doing is putting a thrust bearing between these two. So putting right there, so that even though they're going to be pushing on each other, it's going to be through a thrust bearing, and there's not going to be any friction or any more grinding. Hopefully that's the plan. So what you need is a thrust bearing that has a 3/8 inch inner diameter, and then this one is 13/16 outer diameter, and if you find one that's a tiny bit bigger than that, it might also work, but if it's much bigger than that, it's not going to work, because otherwise you won't have enough clearance, and it's going to interfere with the other part of the gear that the worm meshes with, and it's going to hit it. But this one with a 13/16 outer diameter, it fits. So these are it's like $6 for a 2 or a 3 pack on Amazon, and I'll include the exact one that I got just to make it easier. So once all of this is back in the saw, then we're basically going to put the shaft through, put the thrust bearing on, put the worm back on, and then put the roll pin back in. So then it's nice and smooth, and hopefully that will keep it from deteriorating anymore. Okay, so now we're going to put everything back together. We're going to start with this shaft shroud. Put that in there. Don't put it all the way in yet. Then take your shaft, and then you gotta line it up to go in there. There we go, like that. And then go ahead and push it all the way through. Not all the way through, but to that point. And then you're actually going to want to have it only a tiny bit out, and then with the rod just barely sticking out, you're going to take the first washer, and this washer will come with the bearing. And you take the bearing, put it on there, then you take the second washer, put it on, and then you push to the shaft the rest of the way through. So that now you've got that fixed part, and then you've got washer, and then bearing, and then washer. So then you take the worm, put it back on. Okay, so you put the worm back on, and then you're gonna have to line up the, basically the shaft should be right flush with the end of the worm. So maybe right about there. And then you want to line it up with the, well, you also want the worm to be pushed back all the way. So then once you do that, then you align the shaft to that. And then over here with my left hand, I'm just rotating the shaft from the outside, and you have to line up the roll pin hole. And mine is not perfectly symmetric, so only one orientation of the shaft relative actually, lets the full alignment of the worm and the hole in the shaft. So you can kind of see that. So that's a pretty clear all the way through hole, but then 180 degrees is not. So you want to align that, and then you're going to take your roll pin and push that in there. Okay, so once you have the roll pin for the worm in, so then you put the wheel back on, and then put the, make sure it slots in there, and then put the screw knob back on. And you don't want that tightened, because then I believe that's going to restrict your rotating it. So you want it on there, but just somewhat loose. There's no squeaking, there's no squealing, it's much smoother. Okay, so that off-center hole in this fixed part of the shaft is for adjusting the gear mesh, the engagement between the worm and the other part of the gear. So basically by clocking it, you can adjust how close the shaft is to the gear, and so by doing that you can fine-tune the engagement that the worm gets with the gear. I'm going to, I've loosened this nut, and then I'm going to be turning this part by hand, and you can see the engagement of the worm gear. With the worm, it either decreases or increases, and so you want to make sure that you're getting good engagement, but also that there's not resistance or any sort of binding. So you don't want it down here where you can see a gap, big gap, and you're just engaging the tips of the teeth. But you also don't want it all the way up here where it's, there's no wiggle room, and it's just gonna, rub on there. So you want it somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And when you tighten this, make sure that you are moving the nut and holding this one in place, that you're not turning the 11/16 on the back, because then you're gonna rotate it and you're gonna adjust the engagement right here. I suppose one other option is if yours has been ground down so much that this roll pin hole is completely useless, I suppose theoretically you could just weld this, weld the worm directly onto the shaft right here at the end, and then still put the thrust bearing there. And I'm trying to think, this is just off the top of my head, whether that would cause any issues, but I can't think of anything right immediately. But if you did that and you had to take it apart again, you would just have to make sure to take it apart, you know, and pull out the shaft this way. So that's another option.